Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's episode, I have got Stephen Williams, and he's the head of EV strategy at Direct Line Group. He's also the head of telematic and connected insurance, and he's worked at Direct Line Group for 10 years. So thank you very much, Stephen, for joining me. It's brilliant to see you.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for inviting me on.
And we've bumped into each other a few times. We were just having a bit of a chat before I started the recording, and I got confused. I thought you were on the EV rally, but you weren't. You were at Move. But sadly, there's a lot of events.
Yes, sadly, not on the EV rally this year. I did do it last year. Fantastic experience. But we've got a lot of change happening in our organisation at the moment, which meant I couldn't make it this year. But we saw each other at Move, and I was at the EV Summit last week where I saw lots of familiar faces. So yeah, I do, luckily, with my role, get to come to lots of the events and meet really interesting people like yourself who are doing really interesting things in the EV space.
Oh, brilliant. Well, and I was, even though I was on holiday in Brittany while the summit was on, I still had massive FOMO. I said to you, didn't I? I was messaging you last week, and I was just like, this just feels wrong. I should be there, but we did at least have some sunshine while we were away, so it was just nice to have a bit of a relax-ish.
At least you've had some sunshine this summer, nothing like the rest of us.
There was quite a lot of rain, actually, to start off with. So yeah. But anyway, let's start talking about you. So you've been, as I said, you've been at Direct Line for such a long time. It must be a decent company to work for. Tell me, because you did a few things before that. Tell me a little bit about your background and what you kind of did in the run up to starting at Direct Line, what you've done at Direct Line. Can you just kind of give me a bit of a rundown even?
Of course. Yeah, no problem at all. So, scarily, so what have I been working now? 26 years, which is already quite scary. And it started out working for banks. So I did financial services. I worked for HBOS, Halifax Bank of Scotland, for probably about 10 years. Worked through the financial crisis of 2008, which was an incredible learning curve, not necessarily for the best reasons, but you learn a lot about yourself when in stressful situations, in difficult situations, and it was certainly interesting to be inside a financial institution going through that kind of period.
Yeah.
And then I left there. I took redundancy because that whole kind of industry had changed after that. I'd gone in working as a relationship manager because I wanted to work with small to medium-sized businesses and help them grow and play a role in that. So I guess try and have a bit of my entrepreneurial spirit in that kind of role, and that kind of changed. And I thought, well, that's not for me anymore. And then I bumped into someone I used to work with, and he said, hey, I'm working for a company called Go Compare. It's a price comparison site. Have you ever heard of it? And I was like, no. What is a price comparison site? And then I joined Go Compare, similarly worked as a relationship manager, and then I started working in new product development around different verticals, so money and business insurance and lots of other different things. And I was there for about 4 years, and again, that was really interesting, working for a much smaller organisation. I was maybe 65th, 67th through the door, so it was a great place. You got to, you sit with the CEO, Hayley, who's brilliant, and Lee, who kind of headed up the business, as well as every part of the business, because it was so small. You would literally walk over to the next desk, that would be marketing, the next desk is your digital team. And then 10 years ago, I got chatting to Ian Exworth, who was at RSA, a different insurer, and I'd worked with him as managing the relationship with them, and he was looking for someone to come and join Direct Line to work with the price comparison websites. So whilst Direct Line isn't on price comparison websites, Churchill and Privilege, which are two of our other brands, are. So I took the step of joining them. It was a very stressful period because I did 3 of the most stressful things you'll do in 1 month. So we sold our house and moved into rented accommodation while we waited to buy a new house. And
Yeah.
we moved into a rented accommodation on the Saturday. I started my new job with Direct Line in London on the Monday, and then my daughter was born 1 month later. So we moved house, had a baby, and got a new job all within
Oh
a
my
month. So
God.
a very a glutton for punishment, clearly.
Oh, you are. You are. Oh my God. That
Yes.
I can't
I wouldn't
imagine.
recommend it, Liz. I would not recommend
No.
doing
And I mean, your wife as well giving birth. I
it.
mean, that the
Yes.
whole lot must have been
Yes.
just
She certainly
gone.
wouldn't recommend it, no. And she'll still talk to you now about how convenient that I got a job in London, which meant being away 2 nights a week with a newborn baby. So I got at
Oh,
least 2
she'd have
nights of
loved
sleep.
you, wouldn't
Well,
she? She'd have
we're
loved
still
you.
together, so it probably wasn't as bad. But yeah, looking back on it, probably not the most sensible decision. But then, yeah, I've spent 6.5 of my 10 years here managing relationships with price comparison websites. So looking at distribution. So how do customers buy our insurance products? How should they be designed? And then 3.5 years ago, Ian, who's the guy who brought me into Direct Line,
Hmm.
he'd now moved over to our commercial business, and he was given a remit to go and look at electric vehicles and what's happening, where are we in the transition. And he kind of came and said, look, Steve, would you like to get involved in this kind of side of your desk? And I was like, yeah, cool. Sounds like an interesting thing to do. And we started by going to fully charged. So 4 or 5 of us went to fully charged in Farnborough, and we were just blown away. We were kind of like, wow, this is way further forward than we probably realised. We've always insured electric vehicles since the Nissan Leaf
Hmm.
arrived. So we've played a part in insurance of vehicles. Tesla, for example, we were their UK insurance partner for several years. So we've always been kind of involved from an insurance perspective in supporting the early stages of that transition. But coming away from fully charged, we were kind of like, right, there's more to this. There's pace growing, there's a bit of momentum growing to this, and we need to start kind of reaching out across our whole group to understand a bit more about, are we ready? Are we thinking about this in the right ways? And some of the other things we came away with were people still do the same things and still care about the same things. So we were like, and I don't know why we thought this might be different, but people were there looking at the cars going, is the boot big enough to get a pushchair or a set of golf clubs in? Can I get two or 3 car seats in the back, etc.? So there's still the same things applied from from people going in, and we could see that it was still relatively early in the adoption stage because we kind of went in, and I remember one specific talk where they said, right, everyone stand up if you've got a smart meter. So pretty much everyone in the tent stood up, including me, and then they said, stand up if you've got a smart thermostat. And smugly, I was still standing up, so I've got a Nest. I was like, yeah, I'm down with the kids here. Then they said, stay standing if you've got an electric car. And at that point, I didn't have an electric car, so I had to sit down. Most people were still stood up. Then they said, stay standing if you've got solar, and most people still stood up. And then they said, if you've got a battery. And I was like, a battery? What do you mean, a battery? Because I had no idea that obviously batteries are linked to solar panels and battery storage and stuff. It wasn't even on my radar. So I was like, okay, well, there's clearly momentum, but conscious that we're probably still in relatively early adopter stage 3.5 years ago. But we need to be thinking about this now. And then off that, we did some more research and we then formed a new team. So I then came across and we've set up a new team which was called the Electric Vehicle Strategy Team. And my role has kind of evolved from there. So it started off with just sort of, I guess, going out and trying to understand the market, and then evolved into, right, we've got a very wide-ranging group. So we've got Direct Line, Churchill and Privilege, brands that everyone will recognise, hopefully from an insurance perspective. We also have a new insurer that we built from the ground up a few years ago called Darwin, which again is on price comparison websites. We've got Buy Miles, who joined the group last year, who are pay as you drive, so pay by mile insurer. So we've got a real range of insurance propositions in the market that customers will recognise, hopefully 1 or 2 of at least. We then also got behind that, we're one of only 2 insurers that have their own repair network. So we've got 23 repair centres, and And what that allows us to do is manage the process of repairing our customers' vehicles much tighter, and try and get those vehicles back to those customers as quick as possible, but also allows us to learn. So about things like new technology, electric cars being a really good example. And then we have Green Flag, so we've got a recovery business as well.
Yeah.
So we've kind of got brands in every part of the motor ownership life cycle. And my role then has been, and the squad's role has been, to go out and start saying, okay, within our auto services business, what are you thinking about? How are you thinking about new technology? How we repair that technology? How we do that in a sustainable way? From a pricing and underwriting perspective, how do we start understanding what, if any, differences there are in the way people will drive and behave within that driving of an electric vehicle versus an ICE vehicle? Again, with recovery, so Green Flag, how are you thinking about the fact you can't just tow an electric car like we've had to do with ICE vehicles? We have to think about how we do that differently. So the last sort of 3 years has been a mixture of going to the events like we talked about, Liz, and EV Summit, Fully Charged, or everything electric as is now, Move, to try and understand what's happening in the wider ecosystem, in terms of where the manufacturers are going, where the charging infrastructure is going, and how all of those things then impact the process that we have to manage. And also internally then running various, whether it's we do webinars, a little bit like what you're doing here. We've done those things internally, where we've brought Melanie from ZapMap, the EV Cafe crew have come in and spoken to us and done myth busting. We've had Octopus talk about smart charging and solar panel and energy tariffs and all that kind of stuff. So how do we help the internal education? How do we make sure that the people who are thinking about insurance products and services are thinking about that with an EV mindset as well as an ICE mindset? So that's been the last 3.5 years. And then just over a year ago, or about a year ago, I was asked then to get involved with looking after the telematics and connected insurance. And telematics is probably something that people hear and they automatically think of young driver and a black box in a vehicle. It's actually evolved quite a lot from that time, and connected is kind of what the evolution of telematics will become. So it's talking more about connected mobility. So the fact that EVs, but not just EVs, obviously most new cars will have a level of connectivity that will permit the customer to share data with a range of services and products, including us. So it could be Spotify and Apple Music, etc., and Google Maps, but also from an insurance perspective, your ability to pass information to us on how you're driving, where you're driving, if you had an accident, etc. So yeah, I guess I'm involved because one thing links to the other, that all the great, interesting stuff that's happening in mobility will ultimately probably link to connectivity and the ability for customers to pass data, which means we can think about shaping different products and services for customers. And then that brings you kind of up to date.
That's brilliant. I was going to ask you about connected insurance as well, because I hadn't actually thought about all that kind of information passing from, kind of one place, from the vehicle through. I'd not actually thought about that. So that's really interesting. Can I just ask you, because lots of people, we've talked about the negativity on this podcast a lot, but with the kind of the mainstream media, but some of it is actually hit the insurance market, hasn't it? And obviously you've kind of said to me, haven't you, that people are, you're making sure that the people within the organisation, within the Direct Line group, get that level of training and understanding about products and about electric vehicles, etc., etc. What is happening with kind of how is that knock-on effect from kind of the negativity affecting the EV insurance market specifically? Is it affecting it, or is it just being blown out of proportion?
So I think with insurance, it's a very, quite a unique product, because it's not very often in your life you will buy something hoping never to use that product.
Yeah.
So part of the challenge we have as I guess as an industry, is that you're in motor insurance, for example, you have to buy motor insurance. So for a lot of people, it's a bit of a grudge purchase. I'm being made to buy something that I believe I'm a good driver, so therefore I'm never going to have to use this. And hopefully, touch wood, most people will never have to use insurance will never have an accident. So there's a bit of a challenge anyway around the perceptions of insurance, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, nothing's happened, nothing's changed for me in the last 12 months. Why has my insurance premium gone up? But the whole concept of insurance clear is we all pay in, and then a certain percentage of people are going to have an accident, and therefore we've got to be able to support those people. But I can understand from a consumer's perspective that's quite a difficult concept, especially in a world where you've got so many other things to worry about. You're not, and certainly before 10 years ago, when I joined Direct Line and started to understand insurance and the intricacies of insurance more by working inside the industry, I probably would have been in a similar of a mindset. You don't realise the complexity of what goes on behind the scenes. And EV is a really good microcosm of all of those things that play with one specific segment. So I guess we use, as an industry, past experience to predict future experience. And with ICE vehicles, we have, as an industry, over 100 years of understanding how people drive, the cars that are there, how we can repair those cars, the technology within those cars. What we've seen or are seeing with electric vehicles is a very different set of challenges and opportunities within that. But if I think about repair, so that's a key element. And it's not just specific to us in insurance. Obviously, you need to get your car repaired for a whole variety of reasons. But according to the Institute of Motor Industry, there's 39,000 EV qualified mechanics and engineers now. They estimate there's still going to be a shortage of around 16,000 qualified by 2032. Wow. So there are less people at the moment who are going to be able to fix an electric vehicle, qualified to manage the repair, than there are ICE. And in any labour market, a scarcity of that experienced qualified people means the cost, they can understandably charge a higher premium for their services, and therefore it's harder to find those people, and then you have to pay them more money. So that's one element of cost, for example. Another would be things like battery technology. So you and Turk, I've had some great conversations at EV Summit last week. We were talking about battery technology, but for us as an insurer, we don't have an equivalent situation in an ICE vehicle where if one bit of the car gets damaged, it's worth 40% of the cost of the vehicle. And you have to have specific technicians qualified in a very specific way to manage how we do that. And equally, I guess, in an ideal world, what would happen is we'd have diagnostic capability as insurance companies, which would say, going into that accident, that battery had 100% health. Outside of that accident, post that accident, the diagnostic tool is telling you there's still 100% health. Okay, well, now we know the battery, very high probability, has not been damaged, and it's more of a cosmetic repair. And I would go down one process. If we could see that battery health was 5 or 10%, then the fact that the battery is damaged to that level would probably suggest to us a whole lot of stuff has happened to that vehicle because they're so encased and low down and protected within the vehicle that vehicle is probably a write-off based on the amount of damage that would have to happen to that battery to get damaged. And then there's a middle ground, which is the battery could be 50, 60%. And then you'd have to say, well, we probably need to do a check of that battery in a more detailed way. But at the moment, those processes don't really exist, and that data isn't available to us. So we can't monitor battery health in that way that would help us triage that car. In an ICE vehicle, you don't have that, because even if there's been an impact on the engine is hundreds of different pieces which you go, okay, that bit's damaged, that bit, we can still put that engine back together. So it's how do we approach and understand that change in technology is another good example. And then I guess at the back end, things like if a car is written off in ICE world, essentially we sell that either to an auction house, buys that off us, or it goes to salvage. And at the moment, an electric vehicle probably follows a similar process, but we need to think about as an industry, and we are thinking about as an industry, is, well, how do we evolve that process? Because actually, you've gone from a situation now where that battery could be worth more than the metal of the vehicle itself. So how do we work with industry to build processes outside of insurance, in terms of industry, to build recycling processes where we can say, right, well, we can take the battery out, we can pass the metal on, maybe to salvage or scrap to be recycled, and then the battery itself we can either use to put into a repair for ourselves, for a customer's vehicle. So if the battery's 100% fine, why shouldn't we recycle that battery and use it to repair someone who may have been impacted in a different accident? Or can we sell that downstream to support things like battery capture, etc.? So could we give it back to the manufacturer who could then recycle it? So again, we have to think about how we evolve that part of the process, and that's insurers working with repair, with recycle, with various parts of different industries. And one of the things I've been really impressed with over the last 3.5 years is collaboration gets used a lot, and it's probably not the most collaborative industry that I've worked in over the last 20 odd years, because
me too.
Everyone's kind of learning as they go, and everyone's really willing to share. And when you go and talk, at some of the events we've talked about, everyone's very open with these are the challenges, and I know someone might be able to help you with those things. So I guess those are some of the factors that we're thinking about in terms of repairs and so on. And again, Thatcher Research, which I know you're aware of, their initial view, and there's a really interesting report about the impact of BEV adoption on insurance repair and claims, which was released last year. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, you can go and find that, and I can send you a link. But they showed a comparison of, here's the process that we go through as an industry to fix and repair ICE vehicles. Here's what a BEV one looks like, and it's very different. And therefore, there's a lot of effort that has to go into this. And I'd probably compare it to how manufacturers are having to invest billions to retool how they produce vehicles, because producing a BEV is very different to producing an ICE vehicle. And the same in insurance. How we manage the claim, the repair, is going to be very different. And therefore, we are going on a learning curve, just as manufacturers are, etc. And obviously, within the manufacturing industry, you can see they've started at higher premium vehicles because that's where they make the margin. And then that flows through to us. So from an insurance perspective, the demographic of people who are buying those vehicles are higher affluence with driveways, all that kind of stuff, because that's where the price point is. So premiums are higher because the vehicles are more expensive. They're more expensive for customers to buy, so if we have to write it off, it's more expensive for us to replace. They will be newer cars, so ICE vehicles, the average age of an ICE vehicle could be 9, 10, in terms of what's being insured when you think of used and new cars. With EVs, it's going to be probably the average age is 2 or 3 years old. So there's a heavy skew to more expensive vehicles, newer vehicles will have more technology. So if I was repairing a 10-year-old Ford Fiesta, the bumper might be a few £100. If I'm repairing the bumper on a Tesla Model 3 or a Hyundai Ioniq 5, that's got cameras, sensors. There's a whole range of technology in that bumper, which means it's probably high hundreds, maybe even early thousands of pounds to replace a part that used to only cost £200 or £300. And then you've got little idiosyncrasies around things like a Nissan Leaf has a charge port on the front of the car. But where do most cars have an accident? Front rear shunts. And therefore, in an ICE vehicle, I don't have to replace a charge port on the front of a vehicle, but on a Nissan Leaf I would. And there are other examples of other manufacturers who've made the same decision to put that on. And again, I can understand why, because you drive into a charging point, and therefore the designer would say, well, it's easier to charge the car from the front. They're not thinking necessarily about, well, what happens if that car is in an accident? Okay, that's an additional £500, £600, £700 that the insurer is going to have to pay out to get the parts to repair that vehicle. So that's another good example of how the evolution of manufacturers and insurers will have to change and hopefully become more collaborative and more connected in terms of us being able to feedback. We do see this already through Thatcher and through some of our own, having our own repair business and working with some of the manufacturers around how we can help feedback on design and how some of their design choices then impact how quickly we can repair and get that car back to the customer. And all of those things then have a knock-on back to ultimately the cost of your insurance, because if it takes us longer to repair your car, if it costs us more money to repair that vehicle, that will ultimately pass back to the consumer. So we're obviously always monitoring how we can improve and reduce those costs and those times. both internally but also with external partners. But because I guess we're early in the cycle of this transition, again, I think people, again, probably don't think about, and why would they? Because insurance tends to be, I've got my car, my insurance is an afterthought. And because you don't buy the insurance thinking about using it, you don't really think about, well, again, why would you? All of the things that we're thinking about that go into that premium that gets presented to you either on our website or via our price comparison site or in your renewal, you're thinking about it once a year when it lands and going, well, it's either gone up or it's gone down and nothing's changed or something has changed. So there's a whole load of things going on behind the scenes that we're having to think about.
Do you think so? There's a few things that you've really got me thinking about here. So I've been kind of scribbling down while you've been talking. So there's one thing you've just said is about the where the charge ports are, and I've always thought, I suppose, wondering why certain manufacturers have actually put charge ports on the front when, like you say, you tend to have like a front-ended
Yeah.
crash. Sorry, accident. I talk about it from my own experience, you know.
Yeah.
And like you say, people don't think about insurance in that way. So there's a few things here that I'm kind of thinking of. Thinking about the charge port, if you look back to ICE vehicles, you either had the place, where you put your fuel is either left or right rear end,
Yeah.
isn't it? Now, I'm assuming that for ICE vehicles, or maybe, I don't know this, and I don't know whether you do, but over like the 100-odd years that we've been driving ICE vehicles, did they try them in different places? Did they put the petrol tanks in different places, or have they always been at the back? Or was there evidence at some point to say lots of people, not everybody, people who have a shunt are more likely to either, like you say, have a rear end or a front end shunt? So like I said, this is a multifaceted question.
Yeah.
Should insurance be something that a dealer, as in EV insurance specifically, that a dealership should be maybe talking about as well? But actually, like I say, so that's one bit. But also, do you know whether that's the reason why where you put your fuel in has always been at the back? Versus why, when you're charging, it can be at the front, it can be at the sides, it can be all over the place.
So I don't know. I can surmise.
Yeah.
My assumption would be that with an ICE vehicle, you've got an engine at the front. So you're
True. Yes.
you
That makes me sound thick, doesn't it?
no,
Saying
no,
that.
no,
Gosh.
no.
No. Sorry. No. I know. But it's kind of, yes. I get you. Yes. The engine's always been at the front, hasn't it?
Yeah. So you've got less space to play with on an ICE vehicle in terms of, apart from a few examples, I guess, where you've got an engine mounted at the back, which are very very few. That kind of front end means you've kind of taken up that space, and therefore, I guess by definition, the petrol tank has had to go towards the back, etc. So that's, I would surmise that's why. I guess, and again, in the same way, I would surmise that the manufacturers who've put the charge point on the front have thought from a usability at a charge point, which again I can totally understand, because they're thinking about the customer as they would, and we're designed, and the ABI, the Association of British Insurers, has said we want to play a role. We see as playing a key role in the broader green transition. So we have a thing called Flood Re, which was set up, which was to help people in flood risk areas get insurance, and that's been a massive success in terms of creating more insurance cover for people who live in those types of areas. So as an industry, have a record of helping trying to address those things. And climate change, again, we're having to think about how all those things are going to impact things like home insurance, etc. And solar panels, batteries, charge points. These are all new things that we're having to consider that weren't around 10, 15 years ago as a consideration. And you talked about, I guess, the repair of the vehicles, and is it more how it's made you think slightly differently there when we've had that bit of the conversation. And again, that's constantly happening for me. So, like I came away from the summit last week, having spoken to Gully and a few of the other guys who were there, Turbocharge as an example, who are thinking about solutions to how we help people with terraced houses who don't have a driveway. And I agree, those are great potential solutions. But now that I work as an insurer, I've developed this, and hopefully my underwriters will be really proud of me in terms of that. That sounds brilliant. Well, all the things go wrong. So how, in an ICE vehicle, we never had your petrol or diesel car connected to your house. We didn't have to think
Yeah.
about someone tripping over a cable, the postman
Yes.
tripping out a cable because you're charging your car in front of your house, or someone tripping on the pavement. In the same way, if you've got one of the charging arms that are going over the pavement, again, for me, it sounds like a great idea, but my insurance risk brain is going, well, it only takes one person to start swinging on that thing. What if that then rips off the wall of the house? Okay, what if that then hits not just our insured car, but the other person's car? And then what happens if that person who did the swinging fell on the floor and has broken an arm or has hit someone else? And so suddenly what's gone from a really simple, customer-focused idea, I'm sitting behind going, yeah, but what if this happens? But what if this happens? What if this happens? Now, again, hopefully, not many of those things will happen, but the whole point is insurance is there to create a safety net that mitigates against those risks. So there are a few other examples of things we're having to think about as an insurer that we haven't had to consider before. And it's the same if you look across all of the industries that are involved, whether it's charging, the manufacturers themselves. We're learning. We're really early in the cycle. So trying to understand and keep pace with the technology changes, the changes in risk profile for us. So again, there are potentially higher and lower risk hypotheses that we think about. So things like you're stepping out of an ICE vehicle, family car, into an equivalent EV car. The torque and acceleration are way faster. You've certainly got supercar acceleration. Now, how are people going to manage that transition? Are we going to see more people have single vehicle accidents where maybe they drive into their wall or into another car in a car park because they forget, oh my God, my acceleration on this car is way faster than the old car used to have. However, then you've also got things like the weight of the vehicle. So the fact that an EV may be heavier than an equivalent vehicle because you've got the battery and the casing, etc. So there's two things that, for example, that we could think about there. So one would be that if that car is going into a collision, the momentum of that collision could be faster because the weight will cause more damage at the point of impact. However, on the other hand, because the weight is at the bottom of the vehicle, the risk of the vehicle flipping and rolling over could be significantly less because the weight will kind of hold the car on the ground. So there you've got another one, which is, could that be higher risk? Could that be lower risk? And then when we talk about things like range and charge anxiety, does that mean that customers will think and drive differently? Because in a ICE vehicle, again, I'm guessing not a lot of people went into a dealership and said, how many miles can this car go on a single tank of petrol or diesel? It was more, what's my miles per gallon? And the industry tells me I should be looking for 40 or 50 miles per gallon, whatever it might be. However, in the new world where the technology has changed, you hear every event we go to, there's lots of talk about charge and range. Range maybe easing back because cars are going 300 miles plus, so that's great. Again, can we dispel some of the misinformation that's out there and to remove that? And again, at last week's EV Summit, we had I guess Vicky, who's the chair of the CPO body, talking about actually a lot of the negative stories relate to old tech that was in the ground and the contracts weren't probably good enough in how they were structured. And most of the new tech is very high reliability, and the process for charging is getting much better. Now, what it might mean, conversely, when I'm as an insurer, or well, the insurance guys, I'm not an insurer, I work at an insurer, but the price and underwriting, the very, really smart guys sitting behind the scenes will be thinking, well, does that mean that a customer who's driving a vehicle that's an EV is thinking about how they drive in a different way? So they're not sure about the range, they're not sure about the charge while they adapt to making that transition across. So will they drive more conservatively? Will they drive a bit slower? Will they be more interested in, what's my kilowatt hour per mile ratio? And therefore they're more attuned to getting efficiency out of the vehicle and driving faster. So again, these are all types of things that we are thinking about and that we're interested in, and which ultimately will play back into what you will end up paying for an insurance premium. But we only have 3 or 4 years worth of information, and there are only 1 million electric cars on the road, and a big chunk of those, 600 to 700 of those, 600 to 7,000, sorry, are in the commercial fleet salary sacrifice world, which we don't insure. So we don't necessarily have, well, don't have anywhere near as much visibility of how those things might play out at the moment. So we're still very much in the infancy, but those are the types of things we're trying to think about, and how those electric vehicle drivers could, I guess, use the vehicle differently, how they will have accidents might be different, how we will repair them will be different. So yeah, we're definitely having to think differently, much as most of the other connected industries are as well.
So I was just going to say, actually, I do when we've got a second-hand EV.
Yeah.
I do drive slower because we've got a small battery. I've talked about this before. We've got a 38.5 kilowatt hour battery. So you're right. I suppose the main thing with me is through this podcast and talking to people like yourself, I learnt a lot.
Yeah.
And it's about kind of connecting with people outside our bubble.
Yeah.
You know, and I would like to think at some point, you know, there's more people listening to this, and there's lots of other wonderful podcasts out there, and you know, it's about connecting with those people, the mainstream general public who will at some point move to an EV, because and especially if we're talking about the new government bringing back the new combustion engine ban back to 2030, then we're gonna go. You talked about the transition. If that does get brought back, then we've got what, 3.5. No, it's more than that, isn't it? I can't count. We've got a number. I really can't count. But anyway, we've got till 2020.
5.5 years.
Yeah. See, I told you I can't count. It's my brain today. We've got we've kind of, the last government moved the goalpost, didn't they? And I'm not going to get into kind of political stuff. We bring the goalpost back. There's a couple of things that's happening, isn't there? One of them is we're making people sit up and kind of go, oh God, they are being serious now. But the second thing is we're going to have other people kind of going, we're being pushed into this again. You know, so going back to what you're saying, we're going to have a lot of people moving in a specific period of time. Like I say, people can drive ICE vehicles until whenever, can't they? They've got a second-hand one. They just won't be able to buy a new one. But I get what you're saying about the risk profile. So the risk profile for an individual like me. So we've got a drive, we've got solar panels, we've got an EV, we've got a battery.
Yeah.
We're not on a terrace. We're lucky, like I say. So the risk profile for me versus somebody 5 minutes away from me on the terrace street who might run a turbocharge is different. And also the risk profile for me having a second-hand vehicle versus a brand new vehicle. Again, so all of this stuff you guys have got to think of. Is there a way? So, you know, you were saying about the state of health. So battery state of health, just kind of going back a step. Now, I know that there's apps like ClearWatt, and there's other, I can't remember, there's other companies that actually are trying to push battery state of health checks. And to me, at the time of an MOT, you'd normally have to MOT.
Yeah.
Why could you not use that time for a state of health check? Would that support you as an insurer in that risk profile? We're talking second hand here, I know that. But would that support you? Would that battery state of health check help you? Or would it need to be through that level of connected insurance that actually you run the battery profile to help you that if you've run a battery profile when that client's renewed their insurance and it says they're at 92% state of health or 99% state of health, if they then have an accident, will that help?
So yes, so having visibility of battery health for lots of different reasons would be very, very helpful. Like I touched on earlier, so how we would manage the claim. It could also be indicative of risk. So if you've got a person who manages that battery really poorly, is that symptomatic of someone who is going to drive their car very poorly, etc. So again, it's could that be a different way of looking at risk in the future? And that kind of leads on to the connectivity. So the example I would give, so as an insurer, if 10, 15 years ago, let's say there was 100 Ford Fiestas, everyone's heard of a Ford Fiesta, so I'll just use that as an example, but let's say 100 Ford Fiestas roll off the manufacturing line and we end up insuring all 100. Every time they come to renewal or they come to market to get a quote, I know how much they weigh, I know what the acceleration is, I know what the kit on the car is. The car is constant through every cycle of me speaking, unless someone chooses to modify them, stick a grill on or whatever it might be. Now, if we fast forward to connected world, and again, this isn't specific to EV, this is also for new ICE vehicles, but obviously for every EV this is probably true. If in the same scenario 100 Model Ys or Ioniq 5s or EV6s come off the line, because of the fact that they are now software-driven vehicles, within a week or a month, I could have 100 different versions of that vehicle. So even though it looks like 100 Model Ys or Ioniq 5s, depending on which software version you've chosen, which subscriptions you've signed up to, which technology you've turned on or off from a safety perspective, which level of regen you've got on, if you've got it on at all, which acceleration mode you're in.
Oh my God.
And, Tesla, we'll use them as the example, they've obviously been the market leader for a significant period of time. They're not doing 1 or 2 software updates a year. They're doing 60, 70, 80 software updates a year. Now, as an insurer at the moment, I don't know any of those things. I don't have the ability to see. So, Liz, me and you might have exactly the same car, and you could be a completely different risk because you've set your car up with all of the safety technology on, lane assist, adaptive cruise control. I might have all of them turned off, but the car looks the same on paper. But that's a very, very different risk. If I've turned it off, and again, I'm sure we've all heard people talk anecdotally about, I've turned off the lane things. They kept beeping at me. It was really annoying.
That is me. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But the point there being, it's not trying to be annoying. It's trying to help you be a safer driver.
Yeah.
Now, I saw Robert Llewellyn had done a video for the Renault Scenic, which I watched earlier in the week, and he said what they've done is they've got the safety, but not in an annoying way. So there is, I accept there's an annoyance to some of the ways, some of the systems, and they're clearly not perfect in how they, lane assist you and so on. We're lucky enough to have a Model Y, and again, sometimes it will do things. You go, well, okay, that's not. Why are you pulling that way or doing this? So the ability to use connected car data for people to share that information in a way that means you get a more accurate price for your risk. Is probably a direction of travel that we might well see. And again, I wear 2 hats at the moment. I say one is focused on EV, and as you can see, there's lots of things I'm thinking about from that perspective. And then with my other hat on, thinking about how we use that connectivity, how we use customers' willingness to share information to create products that then, I guess, reward that willingness to share that information, either through helping them become better drivers. But there's very few things in life where you're doing that in a very dynamic space where there's lots of other people that can impact what happens to you as well as what you do as when you're driving a vehicle. But how can we help use those products to help them become better drivers, more confident drivers, whilst reducing their risk? So it's not that insurance prices those young drivers at a high premium for no reason. There are reasons behind that. And part of it is, as we say, is to use connectivity to help make them improve their driving, but also to be there when at the point of need. So we were talking about this before we started the recording, but insurance is a very odd product, very unique product, really, in that you buy it hoping never to use it or expecting to use it, because most people think they're a good driver. You're buying insurance without hoping to ever realise the value, which is that if something goes wrong, we are there, and that's very much how we see ourselves, is we're there to help put you back on your feet, get you back to where you were before this thing happened, whether it's your car stolen or, God forbid, you're in an accident, etc. And that's kind of a challenge insurance faces. And again, who thinks about insurance other than when it lands on for the renewal? No one really. Again, so that's why as an industry, it's a tough challenge to try and explain to people the value of that insurance, because unless you go through an accident, which is what we don't want you to have, and neither would you, it's very hard to see the value of what you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
But with connectivity, that there's potential that we can change that. So we can then use that connectivity to create products and solutions that create more chance to engage with you as a customer. So whether it's helping you, like you touched on with a long time ago at the start of this bit, you asked me about battery connectivity. So that could be another example that we could use that connectivity to help you proactively manage the vehicle and say, hey, look, did you know that your charging pattern means you're you potentially reducing your battery health by X%? That's going to have an impact on the value of the car if you come to sell it. Did you know you've had the air pressure on your tyres has been below where it should be for a week? Did you know that increases your chance of an accident by X%? Why not go in and get that filled up? Or could we do something with our repair network which says, hey, if you come in, we can do that for you, because it helps you in that it reduces your risk of having an accident for you as an individual, but also for us as the person insuring you. And going back to charge range anxiety, if I can see that you're going on a journey from Reading to Halifax, I want you to take a break, because we know that if you're going past 2-3 hours of driving, that increases your risk of having an accident. So my ability to say to you, hey, look, as a connected customer, pull off, because if you don't stop at a certain place, your chances of having an accident will increase by X because you'll be tired, etc. And then could we do some sort of deal with a charge point operator which says, hey, if you go here as a customer, you might get X. So as an industry, these are the types of things that we'll start to think about, which is how can we use connectivity to give you more reasons to engage with us, and then that gives us more reasons or to talk to you and explain the value that you get out of insurance, and why it is important that you are insured in the first place.
That's really, really interesting. You've covered so many things there. In fact, what I was going to just say to you then, you're right about us needing to stop, and actually the risk of the risk of an accident because you've been driving over a certain period of time. I think somebody from an insurance company needs to tell Nigel Farage that, because he thinks he can drive 500 miles without a stop still, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So there's
Must have an incredible bladder. That's all I can say.
Oh my God. But also, like you've just said, it increases the risk. It's going back to that risk profile. And actually, when you were talking about young people driving, my son's 18 and he has actually stopped driving, but that's another story. But if you look at the number of young people who have had accidents that have been on the news and they've been fatal, even in the last 12 months. And locally to me, and I said this to you, didn't I, before we started recording, locally to me, somebody I know, their son has actually been caught speeding 70 in a 40 on a dual carriageway in local to us. Then there's another car of young lads, and the lad who was driving took the corner too tight and rolled his car. So this is what we all did silly things when we were young. We all thought we were, well, not always, but thought we were invincible, and did stupid stuff. And like I say to my son, it's not necessarily you on the road that's the person who's the risk. It's the person who's driving behind you or next to you or round the corner.
Yeah.
It's those things, and we can't control those risks. It's about us driving as safely as we possibly can. But thinking about young drivers, is there an age is there an age limit on young drivers driving EVs at the moment? Am I right? I can't remember.
No, so when an insurance company is providing a quote, again, why would you know this? But there are hundreds of different factors that go into that price. It's incredibly complex, the number of different models and inputs that go into that. So it won't be one specific thing that decides whether we do or don't cover someone. It'll be a range of different things. So, age, the power of the vehicle, the cost of the vehicle. They're just some of the examples, but there are hundreds of them. So I guess with an EV, again, it'll base on driver experience, license length. There'll be a whole range of things. So it's not one specific thing that says we do or don't insure this group of people for electric vehicles. I mean, I think with younger drivers, like you've touched on, and again, I try not to use younger drivers. What I try to use the term new drivers, because a new driver could be any age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not an age thing. You're right, there is an element that the stats back up. The newer, younger drivers, that lack of experience, that when they're driving, how they're driving, where they're driving, does mean that they are. When we did some research several years ago, we ran a program called Shotgun, which was a tool aimed at young drivers for the first 1,000 days, because a piece of research we've shown that the first 1,000 days are the most critical for a new driver.
Right.
Because again, you're learning, you're adapting. Yes, you've been on the road before, but you've been on the road with mum or dad, with an instructor. You haven't been out on your own, and those 1,000 days are really critical to establishing good behaviours. So we had a program called Shotgun, which offered rewards and tried to help incentivise younger drivers, new drivers, to drive in a better way, in the hope that it then breeds good behaviour going forward. And that's certainly what, not just us, but most of the other insurers who will have a connected or a telematics proposition in the market, it's not trying to be all about stick and say we want to watch you for really negative reasons. What we're trying to do as an industry is say, how can we help you have more affordable insurance? How can we help you become better drivers, safer drivers? Because that's better for everyone. And the ability to connect, whether it's through a phone, a device in the vehicle, or the car itself, will help us create more products that will meet those needs in a variety of ways. And I think, again, part of the with the younger drivers is, if you think about, if there's an accident, let's say there's 4 17-year-old guys or girls in a car. If that car is in an accident and one or more of those people have severe injuries, our part as an insurer is we're going to make sure those people are looked after for the entirety of their lives. Now, if that means they need, God forbid, specific rest of life medical care, they're never going to work again, there may be a life-changing physical injury, we're there to cover that. But that comes at a cost. So, if that person is 17 and they live to 100, we are supporting that customer for the entirety of that period of time. And that's a factor in why those premiums would be high, because if they are in an accident, there's 4 younger people in the car, the cost of supporting those people, which is the right thing to do, is going to be very expensive. But again, that's not something you would, and you've got kids, I've got kids. That's not something you want to think about or contemplate necessarily in your mind.
Exactly.
But that is the reality that we will deal with as an insurer in that worst case scenario. We're there to support those individuals and make sure they have as best a quality of life, and we get them back to as close to the position they were in before the accident. But people probably aren't factoring that into, well, that's why an insurance premium for a younger driver could be £1,000 or £1,500. Those are, again, the types of things we're thinking about in terms of the higher risk, and what's the so what of, if they do have an accident, what's the role we need to play to help and support those customers.
And actually, just going back to what we talked about before, which was my major accident, I'd just gone 18. It was a long time ago. It was 1987. The lad I was in he'd just passed his test 3 weeks before.
Yeah.
He hit a patch of ice, and we ended up in a lamppost. And he had kind of minor injuries, but the engine came through the vehicle. I don't know whether do you remember the old Austin Ambassador? They're like an Austin Princess, but longer.
Okay,
It was his parents' car.
Okay.
And the engine came through and crushed me.
Wow.
So, so actually at that time, the insurance, and it took some time, but their insurance looked after me.
Yeah.
It's not been ongoing, but yeah, and like you say, actually you don't think about that. It wasn't until we started speaking, before we started recording, and I just thought, good God, yeah, that is what insurance is there for. That is what insurance provides you and protects you and helps you, looking after you. So actually, if he'd have had 3 weeks is nothing when you've passed your test, is it really?
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it. I was 18. I didn't think about the fact that, we had not been in the car that often. We'd only we'd only been going out 3 weeks anyway.
Yeah.
So actually it was quite cool. I was in the car with a driver, and he
Yeah.
passed his test and la la la, but yeah, it's something, you've got to have it, because otherwise, if you don't have it,
Yeah. You see, I mean,
what looks at, how can you be looked after?
well, you asked me kind of right at the start of the call about, I've been here 10 years. Must be a great company to work for. One of our stated aims is to be a force for good. And that means lots of different things. That does mean supporting the EV transition and move to greener technology, greener transport, decarbonisation. And insurance has a key role to play in that and being an enabler. But it also means, like we just touched on there, helping customers at what will probably be their most stressful, most anxious part of their year, decade, whatever it might be, and being a force for good to support that customer and make sure we do everything we can to get them back to where they want to be. And I think people have maybe quite a very single view of insurance, because you're not claiming it's a cost, etc. And unfortunately, it's only the point of need where you kind of realise that value. And you're right. I think it's then you go, right, okay, this is why I pay that money for this insurance, because either me or a loved one or a valuable asset like a car or your home is protected. And obviously we hope that that's not going to happen to all of our customers, but we live in a real world where that does, and yeah, that's why insurance is such a critical thing. And yes, hopefully the media at some point, and maybe we as an industry could do a slightly better job of advocating why it's so important, why it's a good thing to have, and whether we do genuinely care about every one of our customers. But that is one of the reasons why I'm still at Direct Line 10 years later. Is it's a stated aim is to be a force for good, both in terms of the products we deliver and then how we support customers in that time of need.
Which is what we as consumers need.
Yeah.
We really, really need that. So I could talk to you for hours, Stephen, honestly. I'm going to ask you one final question, because we've kind of covered media, and yes, maybe the insurance industry could kind of maybe shout a little bit more about what you're doing to try and support the transition. What do you see happening over the next few years in the run up to, maybe, like I say, if we say the ICE ban stays at 2035, whatever, what do you see, but what would you like to see happen with kind of like what you're doing as an insurer, what's happening with insurance premiums, and kind of just the overall transition and skills, for example? That's a lot to ask you in a final question. It's a
No, that's
multitude
okay.
of things.
That's okay. It's a great question. So there are things that we're already doing to future proof for the next 5-10 years. So within auto services, we've got two very specific teams. One that looks at future technology, so trying to understand battery health, battery technology, battery repairability, insurability of new vehicles, how we work with the OEMs to get better repair method access, part supply. Because again, part of the challenge is a lot of the manufacturers are coming into the EV space are new. Tesla are still new in manufacturer terms, and then you've got BYD, Chery, Aura, Amodo. You've got Fisker being a good example of someone who's come in and sadly has gone away. Again, that causes headaches for us as an insurer. What happens if a Fisker now has a crash? How would you repair that vehicle? How would you get the parts, etc.? So we've got a team that's focused very much on that. So how do we make sure we are skilled, we have the equipment, the processes to manage and repair these vehicles? And alongside that team, we've got another one, sustainability team, who are looking at how do we do that in a greener, decarbonised way. So some steps we've already taken are recovery vehicles that transport cars between sites only use hydrogenated oil, so they're not fueled by petrol or diesel. And again, we'll continue to look and see, are there ways to maybe electrify or further reduce emissions from that part of the process. They're looking at how do we install charge points, etc., in an effective way. Again, like most parts of the industry, getting the right level of power to a site at a cost-effective price level in a way that can be met within timelines is difficult, because lots of these repair sites will be obviously in place for several 10, 20 years on industrial sites where the power capability is the power capability, and everyone's going to want to increase their power. So how do we do that? How do we do that in a really efficient way? And then specific things like one of the projects we're looking at the moment is how do we move away from using gas-powered paint spraying booths to electric. And again, we've got one installed. We've made the first one. We're learning from that, and then how can we roll that out? But again, you need to have the right level of power to the site to be able to make that change and have the charge points to support that. And then the other one is having EV courtesy cars, so that we're putting an EV driver in an EV courtesy car, not into an ICE vehicle. So they're some of the things we're doing. And one of the great things about those two teams as well is we've got Felicity and Carrie leading them. So we've got two amazing women driving that change and looking forward in the business. We've then got Maria, who works in my team, who's focused on autonomous vehicles or self-driving vehicles and how that technology is going to evolve and change. So we're the insurance partner for Scale, which is a UK project which includes Innovate UK and several other stakeholders, that's looking at how a trial next year where we've got pods moving. So again, how do we understand the liability risk, the insurance risk of those things? Because we're now moving from, we talk about insuring the driver. With new cars, we're talking about some balance between the driver and the vehicle, because the car is doing some of that driving. You look at Blue Cruise from Ford in the Mustang, where you can have some hands-on or hands-off driving on motorways and stuff. So we're starting to see the levels increase, and again, then there becomes the question of the risk. So what happens in an accident? How will we prove or disprove whether it was the car that was at fault, it was the human that was at fault, it was somebody else's car? And then when you get into fully autonomous vehicles, that's a whole new world of that is reliant on the tech in the car, that's reliant on the road markings, it's reliant on traffic signs, traffic lights. Where and how you start to understand the liability and assess for that is a whole new world. So again, we've got Maria looking at that, which is great. And then Rebecca, who also sits in my team. So again, there's a theme here. Amazing women working in amazing roles in our EV transition and sustainability world. How the market is changing. So Rebecca is looking very much at SMT data, new automotive data, DVLA data, how we pull that in again to how do we understand the transition that the market is going to go on? So one of the key themes at the moment is referenced everywhere, Auto Trader and SMT, lots of people will talk about this, is that a lot of cars are going into fleet when you look at the categorization. Now we know within that it's a bit broader than that. Yeah, we've got fleets, you talked about Lorna and National Grid, great example of a fleet that's decarbonising and really leading the way. We've then got our partnership, which we launched last September with Motability. So we're their insurance partner. Fantastic opportunity for my electric vehicle hat and my connected hat, because they are over 50,000 electric vehicles. They offer over 200 models of electric vehicle to their customers, and they'll be the fastest electrified fleet in the UK. So we're going on a journey with them that helps us understand and learn about all of the things we've already covered in the session. So that's a really fantastic opportunity. How do we support their customers, take those learnings, and then support the broader customers that we have? And what does that mean for us? How do we then use all of those different bits of data that Rebecca's working on to flow back through to pricing and underwriting, that then starts to help answer some of the hypotheses that we talked about earlier around acceleration and changing of the make and model of the vehicle, changing the makeup of the vehicle on a regular basis. When software updates come, the changing evolution of the car park from a manufacturer perspective, in that long-standing relationships with VW and Ford, etc. But now you've got this whole cluster of new manufacturers. How do we understand how they're going to change things? If BYD and a whole slew of other Chinese manufacturers are going to come in and, I guess, take up that lower price point of the market, what does that mean, and how would we manage that? And then probably the last one, which is links directly to you, Liz, and you touched on this earlier, is we're now starting to see the first selection of what were lease cars, company cars, come into the second-hand market. And why that's exciting is because it opens up opportunity for a whole new demographic of people to get into an electric car to support the transition, which is really crucial for 2030, when it is 2030, 2030, 2035, net zero. But from an insurer, again, it then changes the demographic of the risk. So how do we then understand whether it's, what are the changes we'll see in how people are driving those cars, how all the things I've touched on will look and feel different for a cohort of customers, especially if it then is public charging or charging across the pavement rather than those who are lucky enough to be able to charge in a driveway like you and I. So what do I think will happen? I think obviously the government are going to hope, well, they've said they'll push it back to 2030. That's good because there'll be an alignment, because again, people in the industry know that whilst the last government pushed that back, actually in reality the ZEV mandate underneath means very little has changed from a manufacturer perspective, and actually all it really did was probably cause a bit of confusion and
perception
and uncertainty in the public buying market. But actually everyone in the industries, including the manufacturers, most have said that's really not very helpful, because we're on the course, we're going to be decarbonising. And it's interesting because we're seeing lots of manufacturers now pointing to hybrid because they're seeing a slowdown in demand. And I think it'd be interesting to see how the government faces into that challenge and looks at things like, lots of great things that Auto Trader, SMT talk about, reducing VAT on public charging, which definitely, it's not fair. You're penalising people who can't afford to buy a house with a driveway. They're being double penalised because they're then having to pay VAT on the public charge, which makes it more expensive, and that becomes a barrier. There's things like, could you do VAT breaks on new vehicles that incentivise people to buy a new car? Could you do something similar on used cars? There's the battery certification, so that someone buying a used car has more confidence and the dealer can talk about it. So, I come away from things like Move, from the EV Summit, everything electric, really energised, really positive. You can see things are moving and being in a positive direction, but I'm equally conscious that in lots of those environments, it's people who are already educated, who are part of the process of driving that positivity, talking to each other. And the challenge still remains that how do we convince more customers, more drivers, that they can make the switch now, and it is doable. And Mark Palmer and Ian Plummer from Auto Trader have made a really good point in the last few months around, maybe as an industry we're trying to make everybody move and try to get everybody on that roadmap, when actually what we should be doing is saying this is a progression. So with each step we take, with each new set of charging points in, with each new set of, I guess, data that we have, and how we can then change and evolve how we price and the products we put out, how repairers can fix the vehicles, that will meet the needs of a section of customers. We'll learn from that, and then it's the next section of customers. We can go, okay, we've learned this from those guys and girls, and therefore we can make those changes, which means it's easier for the next cohort of customers. So I think the point they've made there is really critical. And Mark mentioned in his EV site thing, we've got this thing to get to 2030 or 2035, and what I really took away from his one was every customer who doesn't make the switch now to an electric car or even a plug-in hybrid, which is a step in the right direction from a decarbonisation perspective, we've lost that person for 3 to 4 years, because that's the average time someone keeps a car. So every person who's making that decision today is now gone for 3 to 4 years. So if we're going to hit 2030 or 2035, whichever one it's going to be, we need to be helping convince, and not necessarily convince, because that sounds like we're trying to push people to do something. We need to make the information available to those customers to make an informed decision. And I think at the moment, the challenge is that a lot of the information out there is heavily weighed to the no, don't do it side. And a lot of that stuff, rightly or wrongly, is, well, you can argue whether it is right or based on fact or not. And I do wonder a lot about when people talk about the charging network is, I charge in the driveway, but I do use the charging network. I did it last weekend when, went to visit some friends in near Reading, and we stopped a couple of times. I didn't have any problems at all. And I think lots of drivers will feel the same. And I don't know about you, Liz, but when I see people complaining about it, I'm kind of wondering, how many of those people are using that network on a regular basis, or have even ever charged an electric vehicle, or are they making an assumption based on what they've read? Because I'm not saying the charging network is perfect at all. We have all been to charge points where maybe the payment process doesn't work, or it's not charging. And again, that could be the charge point, it could be the car, it could be the key. There's lots of different things. It's not a single point of failure. But if people's perceptions are based, as Vicky had talked about, on old kit and old software and old narrative, how do we change that narrative? And I know, like the stop burning stuff guys, everything electric, podcasts like this are trying to turn that dial. And that still remains the biggest challenge for me, is how do we get more good news stories out? Because person goes to charge point, everything goes okay and leaves as expected, isn't going to get the same headlines as people queuing at Christmas for a Tesla charge point, rightly or wrongly. So it's I can see how in some ways the media is quite difficult, because they're like, well, talking about stuff that works by human nature isn't very interesting.
It's not interesting, is it? You're right. It's not. It's really not interesting to tell people all the good things, is it? But I mean, I spoke to. I remember talking to Gary Comerford a few months ago about. I don't know. Those of you who are listening and watching, you might remember or not. But the Tufty Club. Do you remember the Tufty Club and the Green Cross Code Club?
Yeah.
So you had your Green Cross Code man, the guy who played Darth Vader, or not,
David
you know
Prowse.
what I mean? Yeah, so we could do with something like that. But because we've got social media, it's a bit more difficult. And actually, if you hear, I can't remember what the stats on, if you hear lots of negative things, it takes less negative things for people to take notice of it. Whereas if you've got positive things, it takes a lot more. Sorry, negative things you'll take notice quicker. Positive things, it's going to be, you've got to keep going. You've got to stop the negativity to actually get that positivity across. And going back to just what you said about that 3-year cycle, I was talking to my sister-in-law the other day, and we don't speak kind of all, it's one of those things, you see each other occasionally, and we just had a long conversation, and the car came up, and they changed after their 3-year cycle to a combustion engine Mini. And I was talking about, because there was something on the Women Drive Electric Facebook group about there's a Mini Aceman coming out with a long, higher range. And it's those kind of conversations. It's kind of trying to, because she said that she thought the charging network wasn't good. But
when have you ever used it?
And also, do you know what the other thing is? They're a bit hidden as well, aren't they, in some places? It's not like a petrol forecourt where yes, you've got grid serve and you've got Fastned, which they've got the canopies and stuff like that, and there are others. I know that there are others, but actually, who's pointing them out? Who's saying, there's no standardized sign to say this is EV charging, folks? Do you know what I mean? And this is why people are parking here. There's not really that kind of thing out there to kind of go, hey, we're here, this is what we're doing, so you say you've got a Tesla.
So I got a Tesla Model Y.
So you'll go to a supercharger hub or wherever,
plug in, off you go, come back, drop done.
And Tesla's quite it's quite obvious because it says Tesla on it, but actually even those, it's not kind of like, here it is, here you are. So maybe we just need to kind of change that sort of the way, actually have something. Let's decide on what it looks like so people know that this is a charging hub, and it's not like your petrol station, but this is a charging hub.
I mean, I think the one thing that I think could make, I'll do one thing, a thing that could make a big difference is, at the moment, building on what you just said, Liz, each part of the component is selling itself in isolation.
Yes.
So where's the advert which shows me waking up, looking at my phone where it says, you charge to 100% while you're sleeping, and then looking out the window and it's either really hot or there's snow on the ground, and me pressing the app to get the temperature to where I want while I'm doing my other stuff. Where's the thing showing how much it cost me £6 or £7 to fill my car, and then driving past a petrol station where there are people paying £1.50, £1.60, whatever it might be, and
queuing,
and queuing,
and they're queuing.
to fill fill the petrol up, and then me going to a charge point, you say, and just plugging the car in, getting a cup of tea or whatever with the kids, going to the toilet, and then coming back and being ready to go. And the fact that it's a quieter drive, most of the adverts for the cars tend to be, well, here's a car driving through some mountains or racing against some horses, or the lights have turned green, that shows you it's electric, or hey, it's electric. But from a non-electric, so what? It's electric. Where's the bit that shows you actually? I think the tipping point would be where the consumer feels like having an electric car is as easy or better than running an ICE vehicle. Certainly I've made the change, and so my first, I guess, step into electric was we had a plug-in hybrid 9 years ago. So through our company car scheme, they did a really great offer on a BMW. So we had a BMW 3 Series, and again, it would be heavily subsidised. So well, that's a really nice, the nicest car I'd ever had to that point of my existence. I'm not a big car person, so I was like, well, this is cool. We can have a really nice BMW. And then about 3 months in, we found out we were pregnant with my son. And I opened up the boot. So the battery was at the bottom of the boot, and it was basically this one. Like, well, that's no longer practical. This car's going to have to go back because I can't have two pushchairs in the boot of the car. So that, and there was a tear in my eye when that car went back, Liz. I won't deny it, because I looked at my son when he arrived, and I was like, "You cost me the nicest car." I then had to go and get an estate, a Vauxhall Astra estate, I think I had, which proves I'm not a particularly big car person. But when I made the switch and started looking at EV, and I was like, well, I can't lead an EV strategy team if I don't drive an EV, because I'm doing the same thing that we've talked about there. I'm making judgments based on no experience of having a car. And the first one I had an ID3 for a month, which didn't come with a charging. I didn't have a charge point at home, so I had to rely on public charging. And 3 years ago, that was very difficult. So I spent a lot of money in IKEA. It was very expensive because there weren't a lot of charge points in Cardiff at that stage. So that was a real learning curve. And my wife had a very different experience, because I guess I'd already spent some time trying to understand the industry and how it worked. And I remember she rang me from a charge point in a car park, and she couldn't get the cable out of the machine.
Oh,
it was out of the car, but the cable was stuck in the machine. And she said, "Oh, what do I do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know it." You'd have to ring the charging company, and they basically had to send someone out to restart the machine and then drop the cable back to our house.
Oh God!
So we went through that kind of experience, but with like the Tesla, she absolutely loves the Tesla, because, like you say, where she does have to go and charge, she just plugs it in and it's all taken care of, and the range and all that kind of stuff. So and the kids, I've never been cooler than the day that Tesla arrived. So it was supposed to arrive on a Monday. And I told them, hey, the car's coming tomorrow, because I've taken them to fully charge the last couple of years. They love it. They're fully EV converts. They love the whole thing.
Good.
And then there was a delay. The car wasn't coming to the next day. So I picked them up from school. They were like, "Oh, it's a Tesla, yeah, Dad." And I was like, "Sorry, guys, it's not coming till tomorrow." And they were devastated.
Oh, no.
So the next day they came out of school. They asked me again, and I pretended it was. I said, "Oh, no, it's not. It's delayed again. It's going to be tomorrow." And they came up and they turned into the driveway, and it was like Christmas. They were so excited. Oh. And then when you got the car dancing, and obviously the farts, whoopee cushion thing, and it's making cars fun for them, for kids as well. So they're fully bought in there, and that's why I've got my octopuses and my.
I can't see that at the moment. It's out of my little screen here.
There you go. Look, so I've got a.
Oh, for those of you who are watching it, listening, he's got a big octopus and a little octopus. I've got a big octopus and a little octopus, but you won't be able to see that either.
I've got two big octopuses, but don't tell Octopus. But I've got two big octopuses, one per child.
Right. Okay. Well, you've got to do that. You've got to do that. Do you know? We've been talking. I think you've nearly beat the record of the longest podcast episode.
Well,
but it's been fantastic.
I'm nowhere near as interesting as Robert Llewellyn. So.
Stop. No, it's been really, really interesting, Stephen. And like I say, I could talk to you for absolutely ages. The stuff that you've done and kind of just having these conversations just makes such a difference. So, but I am going to say, I'm going to share. Are you okay if people are interested in talking to you? are you okay if they kind of contact you on LinkedIn? Because you're kind of on LinkedIn a fair bit anyway, aren't you?
Yeah. Feel free,
And actually, find him, for those that, find him. Find Stephen, because, actually you're posting, you're sharing information on there. There's loads of stuff that I've not talked to you about yet. So just search him out and actually have a look on the Direct Line Group website and have a look at Connected Insurance, and actually hopefully you'll recognise now that, just us two talking, that, yeah, it's a pain in the butt to have to pay for insurance, but it's blooming worth it. And I've got to say, as a final point, I've never scrimped on insurance because of what's gone on with me.
Yeah.
I've never scrimped on it, So yeah, and I'm not going to end up on a negative point. You just don't know what's going to happen. So, but to kind of move it onto a more positive, it's been a joy talking to you, Stephen. I really, really appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll bump into each other again at an event in the near future, because there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. Yeah, they are a lot of them. But absolute pleasure talking to you, Liz. Both before and during the recording.
Yes.
And if maybe I'll come back and talk to you again next year, and maybe things will have moved on, and
I think it'd be brilliant
about some other stuff.
Yeah, let's keep talking. In fact, I'm going to talk to you off when we've finished this recording. Maybe I'll get you to do a blog for us if you're up for it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's. I'm going to finish there. Thank you again, and I hope everybody who's watching and listening has enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed it, and I've started saying this on the podcast now, if you've enjoyed it, please can you give us a little bit of a review, just something to spread the word, because we need to. If you're listening and you're watching, you're in our little bubble, let's try and start. I'm not just saying it for me, I'm just saying it for others. So if you can put a little review on, say what your thoughts are, that would be fantastic. So to everybody who's been listening and watching, thank you very much. Thanks to Stephen, and I shall see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Electric Evolution. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay connected with us. And if you're inspired by our journey towards a sustainable future and want to support our mission on a monthly basis, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Your support really helps us to bring the latest insights and discussions in the world of clean energy, electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging and sustainability to you. If a regular subscription isn't what you're looking for, you can always consider buying us a coffee. Just head over to www.buymeacoffee.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Every cup helps us to keep the electric evolution moving forwards. And if you're curious about our work in the EV infrastructure sector at Full Circle Continuous Improvement, why not visit us at www.fullcircleci.co.uk to find out more. And if you want to send me a message, you can always email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. And finally, please don't forget to share this podcast if it's sparked your interest. And let's keep spreading the word about all of these topics that we're covering. So, until next time, see you soon. Bye!